Anybody want to share their story? Anybody want to share about their student? Don't all volunteer at once. Who's got a student? Yeah.
I've got a kid that I talked about before that would fall on the ground. Well, we had someone come in, this specialist come in and kind of go through our program and say, you're going to do this with this, kind of like this is what you're going to do. And the student got upset and fell on the floor, was screaming and was not moving his body but screaming. And so this person says, you have to pick him up, you have to get him out of the room, you have to carry him out of the room. And this man is huge, huge man. And he goes and like a bull in a china shop, just charges in, picks the kid up, wrenches him out of the room, calling like team hands on, let's go, let's get him out of the room. Now this kid is screaming, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. He's screaming, screaming, screaming. And now it turns into a crisis because now he's hitting and punching you because you've wrenched him out of the room. So now that happened in November. Now this kid still to this day does not trust any of us because we were there. So now this kid is having such a hard time, and that's why he just falls right to the floor because he doesn't know what's going to happen then if he tells us that he feels, he's so stuck now.
Yeah, so as a student was falling to the floor, he fell to the floor. There was a behavior specialist in there who said that we had to have to move this student. It was a large man. He picked the kid up. Now the kid's feeling pretty traumatized in terms of that situation, and now they've got even a bigger problem in terms of what's going on. And that's not, unfortunately, unusual. This is perhaps one of the, we'll talk a little bit later, probably after lunch, a little bit on some of the restraint stuff, but I think why we're seeing such a push from schools or from the feds on this, that there's hearings being done right now to see whether they should take this away from us entirely. The ability to use restraint and seclusion, because we tend to use it for compliance. And it's supposed to be used for safety, not for compliance. And so we so misuse this. And it does, for a lot of kids, trigger some pretty significant trauma. I mean, think of yourself if all of a sudden some big person grabbed you, picked you up, and moved you, especially if you didn't quite understand what this was all about. Probably wouldn't warm the cockles of your heart. Right? Probably be a little bit of a problem, and especially if you're a little guy and you don't quite understand things anyhow. So yeah, so it adds to the crisis. So there was a need being unmet to begin with in terms that he fell to the floor. Do you have any idea what that might have been? What might have triggered that?
He gets very paranoid when other students, if a student laughs, for example, then he thinks they're laughing at me, and then he becomes so upset and afraid of that situation that he shuts down.
Okay. Which is, again, a very common thought disorder in terms of this artificial, if you're laughing, you got to be laughing at me, right? And so everybody's laughing at me kind of a thing, and then I respond accordingly. All right, so he's probably already feeling some issues, maybe safety, and then he falls to the floor, all right? He's covering his face. That's another thing that would let me think that this is maybe safety, right? I'm on the floor, I'm frozen, I've got like this. That's a pretty significant message of thing. And somebody grabs him. So we escalated the problem even greater, right, in terms of what's going on, and could have done, what could we have done differently? Yeah, what did you say before that you were doing? Yeah. Yeah, he's we're going to give him some time, all right? We're going to give him some space, okay?
I had a question. So, just so, when he was grabbed and his biggest fear came true, the fact that he wasn't safe, and now someone grabs him and takes him out. So would that require intense therapy after that to deal with a situation such as that now?
Would that require what?
Intense therapy. Some type of
Intense therapy. It depends on it depends on the client, on the student. I mean, there could be some people that it might require some kind of a therapeutic intervention. How intense, I don't know. It depends on what other kind of issues. Let's say this was a student who also already had some previous trauma around issues. That could be a real big issue. If it's not, then it might just be a matter of helping the student understand what was going on. Even some apologies, some work and relationship with that particular person again to develop that. It might not take intense therapy, but it might take some repair. But it could. I'm dealing with a case right now where it was a little girl who was, she had no business being she was put in a seclusion room. It was a situation, again, of compliance, but unfortunately, when she was put in there, she tried to get out, she put her hand in the door, they slammed the door shut and took off her finger. Okay, so now we're dealing with a huge issue, in terms of trauma. And it should never, it just shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened anywhere, kind of a thing. And so and you've got, the child, you've got the staff member, everybody's dealing with it. I mean, it's not just the child that was traumatized. Obviously, as a staff member, you didn't come to take somebody's finger off. So, all right. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this. We're going to do this after lunch, but we're going to talk about some situations, and we're going to talk about fear and frustration, but we're going to do that after lunch. I want to get through some things here. We talk about the fact that you're going to develop a behavior intervention plan. Okay, and we've talked about this before. Again, it's basically going to have two parts to it. Any behavior plan generally is two parts. If I've got a student who's engaging in some inappropriate behavior, I've got to make that behavior not as effective. And I've got to give them a new behavior that is effective. The only time I only have one thing to worry about is if I got a kid who's not doing anything and I just got to get him to do it, then all I got to do is find a way to increase his of doing it. But usually we've got to get rid of something that they're doing that's getting in the way. All right? And so the issue comes down to kind of what's going on. If it's an escape, what's that unmet need? Can I identify that? Is this a kid whose fear? What does that look like? Is this a kid whose frustration? What does that look like if that's a typical situation? Talking about what do I need to promote success? What do I need to prevent? So let's say I've got a student who has got some oppositional defiant disorder. What did we talk about already that's going to be a really critical issue that I better keep in mind to prevent further problems? Choices. Okay? Yeah, this is a kid who's going to have choices because control is critical. All right? What else might I want to make sure staff know if they're going to deal with a student with say, an oppositional defiant disorder when they're coming into play here? Do they want to come in with a nice stern voice? Is that going to be helpful if I've got a kid with oppositional defiant disorder? Do I want to come in with all kinds of, here's what the punishments are going to be if you don't snap to? Okay? I'll tell you right now, you got a kid who's oppositional defiant, punishment means nothing. Take your best damn shot. It's not going to stop me. All right? All they're going to do is that you're just throwing gas on a fire. Okay? I probably want to make sure people know that because not everybody knows that. All right? So I'm going to spell out some of that kind of stuff in here in terms of what's going on. What do I need to do for promotion? So here I'm going to talk about choices. Here I'm going to talk about you're not going to use a stern voice. You're not going to be threatening consequences here. All right? There may be consequences, but I'm not going to get anywhere by just threatening these consequences. All right? What's the behavior? What do I want them to do? And I truly try to have, and I know we've talked about this before, is to lay out a flow chart, because if I'm giving this to somebody, they're not going to read 23 pages of an IEP. Right? Can I give them, here's the plan. Here's what we're doing with this kid. Right? That they can follow it. They have a halfway decent chance of doing that. All right. Now, you're driving down the road. You're going to a wedding. It's an important wedding. And you look, and all of a sudden there is steam coming out of the seams of your hood of your car. What is the first thing that goes through your head? Oh shit, right? Okay. Usually a few cuss words and you're not feeling too good about stuff. Now, I've got a problem. My car is overheating. I've got someplace I've got to go. I've got to get there. Maybe I should just drive a whole lot faster because that will force cold air through my radiator and that will cool things down, won't it? Wouldn't that be a good solution? No, that won't work. Okay, well maybe if I just pull over real quick, go back and open the hood and just open that radiator cap, that'll help, won't it? No, I'll scald my hand and I'll have all the water will boil out of there and now I've got a dry radiator and I'm in worse shape than I was before. All right? What do I have to do? I have to wait. There is no other option but waiting. Okay? I don't want to wait. I want to get to the wedding. But I'm not going to get there in this car by doing anything besides waiting. Okay? if I've got a little guy and he is starting to show steam off the sides of his hood, what do I got to do? I have to wait. All right? I would like to say, gee, I'll threaten him. I'll just nag him. None of that's going to work. Again, I've got to use the gift of time. All right? The more you can help your teachers and your parents and anybody else to realize that when I've got somebody escalating, the time is my best friend. All right? Now, might there be times there isn't time? You know, we're crossing the street and all of a sudden my 2-year-old flops down on the ground because they don't want to walk anymore. You know, I'm not going to say, well, I'm going to give you some time. We'll just sit here and wait and see how you're doing, you know. No, we're going to have to move things along. But obviously, if I've got the ability to leave time, I'm going to use time. Okay. So.
I have something to say. I find that that's difficult for a lot of teachers because they feel guilty that they're not teaching. If I was to just wait till he has time to accept, then well, I would be waiting for an hour. And I said, well, sometimes in the beginning, maybe you have to wait a lot longer for compliance. It's difficult, I can see, because they want to make progress, and they don't want to be seen as somebody like, somebody walks in my door and Johnny's laying on the floor and
I'm giving him time. It is. And I think part of that is we've got to help people understand, and that's part of why we build it into plans. I think the other side of that is the fact that there's the extra commitment that if all of a sudden you are out there, my job is to get you back in here. Now, I'm probably not going to push you back in, but can I make this something more you want to be part of? That's what I've got ability. You know, motivation is interest and that I can be successful. So if I've got somebody who's out, those are the two things I can play with. I want to increase the interest and I want to increase if he looks in there, he's going, you know what, I could do that and do that well. Because I want to bring him back in. And that's where that's where we've got to give the teachers power. That's the power you have. Get him back in by creating an environment he wants to be in, because you're not going to push him in. All you're going to do is all of a sudden now you've got, how long did it take after that large gentleman grabbed that kid, how much time did it take to get that kid back to work? Probably hours, right? Far more time if you've got a crisis than if you gave him the time that he needed to, even if he did sit out for 15, 20 minutes, you're probably going to be way ahead of the game in the long haul.
I think what we run into, and I don't know how many others are itinerant teachers in here, I may have just a 30-minute session. So to wait out a behavior, there goes your entire instructional session, which is where that feeling of, I didn't teach anything. And I have a student that I see for hours in a day, and I will wait her out. And there goes the 2 hours I was supposed to be working with her to have to wait her out.
The question becomes, what's my other option? Well, you're going to do it, damn it, you're going to like it, right? Kind of a thing. That's not going to work, right? And so part of the issue becomes one of that, well, if I've got a kid like that, I've got 30 minutes, I got to make this 30 minutes work. That's going to be one of those situations where it's going to require some real work on your part to have as trapping of a activity in that 30 minutes as you can possibly come up with. And that's a challenge. That's not easy. And sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't,
Well, and I would argue that, even if you're just sitting there for 30 minutes, you're still working with the student because you're still showing them that you have the patience, you're going to be there for them, you can tolerate this, it's acceptable, we can move past this. You're still building that rapport and relationship with the student while you're waiting.
We're going to talk about a self-control plan in a few minutes because as staff, we get ourselves worked up when kids do these things. And I worked at a residential treatment center for kids with emotional and behavioral disorders. And we had a therapist that worked with the kids, and when he was working with us as staff members, he would say, you only have to hang in with a plan one day longer than the kid's going to think you're going to hang in. If you can hang on just one day longer than the kid, that's all you got to do. And that literally is part of my mantra. When all of a sudden I'm feeling tense, it's like, one day longer. Just have to have one day longer.
Can you talk maybe after lunch or at some point during the day about how to differentiate a kid who hasn't learned how to self-regulate, who maybe is coming from an environment where there really hasn't been consistent has the capacity to grow and to begin to accept others versus a kid who's truly oppositional defiant, who has it within their hardwiring that they're just not going to be able to respond.
And both can learn. Both can learn to self-regulate, and quite frankly, it's not even that different in terms of what you do. The problem is the kid who is oppositional defiant triggers us in a heartbeat. I mean, there's almost this part of them that wants to trigger us because that's part of how they feel like they're in control. And so the kid who's just not self-regulated, oftentimes you can see this is this poor little guy who's just doesn't know what to do, whereas this other kid's kind of going, you know what, you're an asshole and you can't make it, and you're going, you're going too hard too. You're going to do it and you're going to like it, right? But yeah, we'll talk about when we get into some of the things later this afternoon.
I'm sorry.
No, this is your time.
And even if we talk about it at lunch, do you have any strategies or suggestions for supporting students, like waiting them out, giving them that wait time, but how to kind of, that's it when they don't understand the concept of time. So like if it's a student, for example, a student with vision impairment who's totally blind, that just really struggles with understanding the whole concept and even picking up on maybe some of like the cues that somebody with sight will be able to pick up from their peers. Like,
Let me think about it. I don't know. That may be one of the, some of your colleagues here might be able to help you with more too. We'll open that up this afternoon. So think about that over lunch, and if you've got plans or ideas, we'll talk about that. Okay. All right. We were breaking for lunch at 12:15, you said? Okay. All right, so we got a few more minutes. All right, so I want to talk about this just really quickly. You've probably seen this before. This is this good old crisis cycle kind of a situation that's going on. Life is going along here, life is pretty good, and there's a trigger. Now the trigger might be somebody laughs, and I think they're laughing at me. The trigger might be reading. The trigger might be writing. The trigger might be math in general, whatever's going on. For some kids, I call them basket kids. It's stress. And it can be different stressors. You give me 3 stressors in a row, I'm gone. They don't have to be the same ones. So today I got up late and Mom yelled at me. I had a crappy granola bar for breakfast and I got on the bus and somebody took my seat. Boom. That's all it takes. Okay? And trying to find what the trigger is incredibly difficult for these kids because it's different. And there isn't a trigger. Stress is the trigger. Okay? So if you're doing those FBAs and you're going, I can't find a trigger. I can't, it's probably a stress kid. All right? Don't feel like you're the Lone Ranger. So I'm going along, I'm triggered, I start to get agitated. Oftentimes this is where I want to see, is this kid telegraphing something? Is he showing me that there's some agitation going on? Can I pay attention to that? And it's amazing how many of our teachers miss that entirely. There's actually been research where they had like the 3 of you are my Confederates. I want you, and I've got the rest of the people here in these 3 tables, you're my students. But you 3 are working with me. You're just going to do what normal students do. You're going to talk, you're going to do your stuff that you do. I want you guys acting out 75% of the time. Then I want you to slowly start improving your behavior. Start getting better and better and better. You're my general population of teachers. I want you to let me know when you see a difference in these students' behavior. How far does she have to bring it down from 75% of the time before you even notice there's a change? What do you think? How far does she have to bring it down? She's got to bring it down to 15% before the average teacher even notices a difference. Part of it is because as teachers, we generally look at the class as a whole, and there's still other people acting out here. And I'm not necessarily paying very close attention to given students. This is one of those things that, given the environment that we have now with so many kids with mental health issues and different kinds of things going on, we've got to be better at getting our teachers to actually watch kids' baseline behaviors. When is this changing? When is she starting to give me some signals that things aren't like they typically are? Okay? So can I observe, especially some of those high-risk kids, you need to know, my 2 kids, If Dad got loud, that was a problem. If Dad was upset and I was going, wah, 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 you know, that was a problem. But if Dad got quiet, this was not good at all, okay? And they better pay real careful attention that when Dad got quiet, that something was going to hit the fan pretty fast. Now, fortunately, my kids were bright, and they picked up on that pretty quickly, and they would learn that that was when you better toe the line. Dad starts being quiet. We've got to have our teachers being able to look and see what's going on. So all of a sudden, I'm seeing this kid is moving away from their baseline, and they're going to escalate. Now, the problem is that most teachers throw gas on a fire. So I'm sitting here, I'm teaching, all of a sudden you say, math sucks, I'm not doing this shit. What do many teachers do now? You can't swear in my classroom. And they move to the next behavior. And then she says more swear words and throws her books on the floor. And you're going to pick those up too. And we just go right on up the line with them in terms of what's going on there. And then they go up here in the crisis, all of a sudden she's flipping desks over, she's throwing books, she's saying she's going to hit me, she's doing all these kinds of things. And she finally, and during that time, most people realize that this is where time becomes an issue in terms of giving some space, even if it's nothing, even if it's I've got to restrain. And she starts to de-escalate. Things get better. She is no more calm there than she is here. But we'll see teachers as they're coming, and when we get back to the room, you're picking all those books up, and you need to apologize to all of your peers. And what happens? Right? Because she's not anywhere near baseline yet. And sometimes kids will go down, they'll get into this hangover. All of a sudden now I'm worried that I've destroyed my relationship with you. I'm worried that you're going to call Mom and Dad, and then I'm going to have all kinds of grief back at home. Right? And that field trip that we're talking about, I'm not going to go, am I? This is keeping me from the field trip now, aren't I? I'm going to lose the field trip. And all that kind of stuff starts triggering out here. Still not a time to talk about consequences. I'm not talking about those until here, when the kid's back to baseline. Teachers really need to understand this. Okay? Now, the challenge that comes into play is that as I'm going up here, some other things happen. My cognition goes right into the toilet. All right, a couple of things happen. The blood is pulled from my brain, and it goes, and my internal organs, and it goes to my arms and legs so I can run or fight. All right. My body floods my bloodstream with adrenaline, so I have more strength, more energy, much more quickly to use that energy in terms of running for fight or flight. It also makes me less susceptible to pain. So if I get hit in this situation of a fight, I'm likely to be able to still keep the fight up, and my body floods with cortisol. Remember, think of hydrocortisone, it's like for inflammation kind of things. What that does basically is it helps my body in terms of my blood flow. It also completely shuts off the cerebral cortex of the brain, because this is not a time to think things through. This is a time to act. And what it does is it says, I'm shutting everything down except for the primitive brain. That puppy's going to be pumping for 100%. Right? Start fighting or running. Right? This is not a time of deep thought. So part of the issue is that you'll get people who are trying to talk to the student during this time and giving them what would help, and let's give you some open-ended questions. They're not ready for that. I want you to be safe. Here's 2 options. You pick one. That's what they can handle. Now, what would make you feel safer? I don't know. The hell out of my face, right? And I've got to be clear, all right? I've got to be concise during that time. Okay? When a student begins to move away from their baseline, people, you are going to move away from your baseline. You are going to respond. And the teacher who tells you that, not me, I can handle this 100%, doesn't bother me in the least, is either a psychopath or a pathological liar, and you want neither one of them on your faculty. Right? Your body is going to prepare for fight or flight also, and there is not a darn thing you can do to keep that from happening, but you can minimize how far you move away from that baseline by a self-control plan. And most of us that have been in the field for a while have one, whether we know it or not. But if you have not thought about it, think overtly about what is your self-control plan. And it usually involves some breathing. I'm going to take 2 deep breaths. Mine is I take 2 deep breaths. And I tell myself, one more day. Right? Just one more day longer. That's all I got to do, right? And I touch my fingers together because I need a grounding thing. So I end up touching my fingers, and now I'm ready. Now I may have to do that 15 times during a crisis. Because anytime I feel myself kind of rising to the occasion, I better be ready to put a self-control plan back in, because otherwise I also am losing cognition, and I want to minimize my loss of cognition. All right? I was in a classroom not too long ago. They were working with a little guy with autism, and they were working across the table. The teacher was working with a student, and the student didn't have language and was evidently fed up with the task and decided that he would use his behavior to communicate that he was done, and he took a swing at her. And she was very good. Unfortunately, the school was using a punishment paradigm. They were using a contingent hand restraint. So as soon as he tried to swing at her, she took his hands and held them down on the table for a count of 5. Okay? So now I've got his hands down. The table's too wide for him to kick me. It's too wide for him to headbutt me. What's he got left? Spit. Big old hocker, whoom, right across the table, right into her face. Okay? Most of us would rather be hit than spit on. Okay? Unfortunately, she did not reissue her self-control plan, and she reached across the table and jerked the kid over the table, and they were off to the races, kind of a situation. Okay? She needed to be able to reinitiate her self-control plan just like she did when he was trying to take a swing at her, and it didn't happen. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. It ain't going to go on. So basically, you need that self-control plan, breathing, self-talk, maybe a grounding action. All right, this is where you're going to make the difference. We've got to get staff ready and prepared to, during the earlier you can in that agitation phase, give that empathetic I statement and 2 choices, the better off you're going to be. And for a lot of people, we're going to do some role play. When we come back from lunch, we're going to actually role play some of this. That sounds real easy. It's not. Because remember, in the time, you're not thinking that clearly. I'm thinking, oh shit, what are those 2 choices I could give him? And for some cases, what you may have to do is think about some of the kids that you work with and almost kind of have some choices in your back pocket. This seems to be, math is a real problem area. If we have a problem in math, what could be 2 things I could kind of have ready to offer him in math? Right? Have some stuff kind of preset, and that might also even be part of, just some suggestions that you might put in your behavior intervention plan so people can think about it. Because in the moment, we'll see just in the role play how hard it is to think about 2 things the things that have happen. Okay? So basically what we're trying to do is to stay away from that power issue in terms of curriculum of control and power struggles. All right. So, okay, we're going to stop here for lunch. All right, one thing that was brought up was, like, some of you that have hearing problems, what was it like when you were in the classroom? Some of the issues in terms of experiencing not being part of the group or whatever's going on, what were some of the experiences that you had that you think would be important for people who are working with students that would be important to know? Yeah, as students, when you were in the classroom, some of the things that we've talked about today in terms of feeling like, perhaps you were marginalized or not part of the fabric, or issues around being able to communicate what you're feeling and being stuck. What were some of the issues that you had that you think would be important for people to know? Put you on the spot here.
ASL Sign Language. You have to, if you don't communicate, you're not going to teach anything. And I think it's very important to, me as a social worker observing teachers in the classroom, their assumption that the student understands their sign language is an assumption. I know some of the students will understand their teachers, but others don't understand, but they don't ask the question. Like just right now, for example, I didn't realize that question was being directed towards me specifically. So the student will be sitting there and this teacher thinks, oh, this student's being defiant. They don't want to participate. Well, maybe they didn't understand the question.
Okay.
So self-awareness on the teacher's part.
All right. So that the students might not recognize the sign that the teachers are using, and or even necessarily being tied in, because the teachers oftentimes aren't involving them, and so they're not tied into to what's being said.
Come back.
Something that I learned was just preferential seating is not always best in the front. I used to sit in the front because that's where teachers were, and you have that whole fear of not knowing what's going on behind you because you can't hear what's happening. So preferential seating is a recommendation for a student to be where that student is most comfortable.
Okay. So preferential seating is not necessarily always in the front because you're going to miss stuff there. So looking where does the student feel comfortable. All right. Any other issues that people want to share? I think this is just, obviously you're the experts of working with this population. So anything that's come up or anything that you've been thinking? Yeah.
One thing I had recently is a district not understanding the difference between a student understanding sign language and using sign language versus using an interpreter. So getting instruction directly from the teacher versus then having to split their attention between a person who's talking and a different person who's signing, and not understanding that that's a different skill.
Okay. All right. Yeah, definitely. That would be that's a whole different issue.
Not for me, for several of my students, they've not understood that the teacher was giving them eye contact, and that was their cue to answer the question. Because they didn't necessarily see the eye contact or the expression on their face, and they feel exposed almost, or embarrassed, because then the teacher's like, answer me,
Sure.
what is your answer? And they're like, wait, you were talking to me.
Okay.
So I think sometimes too, if it's not a physical disability, people forget that there's a disability there.
Right. All right. So then you're working with students with visual. Yeah. So I didn't see that the teacher was giving me eye contact. I didn't get those pick up on those cues.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anything else people want to share? All right, we're going to make you guys risk a little bit here. What I'd like you to do, and basically this is to get a sense of just how challenging this is. Not everybody has to do it, but at your table, what I'd like is for somebody to be willing to play the role of a student, one of you to play the role of a staff member. Maybe a couple of you can be staff different times, but it'll take a few minutes and just give you a chance to say, come up with a situation in which you're frustrated. Show frustration, so show those signs. Be upset, be angry, whatever's kind of going on. Don't use any props or anything else like that. What I'd like to do is have the person think about how are they going to use themselves effectively to communicate to that person. So especially, if you're using sign, how are you going to do this? That I statement and two options. So hear enough about what the person's frustrated about, the sense what that need is, and try to come up with two simple choices that's going to address that need. So you can think of a real situation perhaps that you've dealt with. Make one up, I don't care. But we're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes and just play with this a little bit. And I want people to share what that felt like to try to come up with these two options. Okay? Don't all jump up at once. I know you're all going, damn, role play, I hate this stuff. Anybody got any insights to share? Yes.
Of course. If we want to come up with examples, so like we have a data collection system that we use, so we're going to pull some examples and then come up with some sample I statements that can be used for each of those scenarios that we picked, and then come up with some positive choices that can be used so that people are handed some ideas
Right.
instead of having to come up with them on their own, and even having just give them one choice is always going to be the same choice. So do you want to go sit in the chair in the back? Or do you want to go get a drink of water? That's always going to be one of your choices, so that they only have to come up with one on the spot instead of having two.
Yeah, if they meet the need. I think part of the issue is, and a couple things that came out, one is the issue is that sometimes for example, they had a situation where it was a person who would get kind of locked into their own fantasy world, and it was like getting them out of that. And that may not, that's not really an escalation. That's really where I'm just kind of perseverating and locked. And they're even like just giving a kind of a pre-compliance request. So I'll oftentimes think about kids too in terms of that if I had to bet a week's salary, what I could ask her to do that she would do. I want to know that. So hey, would you do me a favor? Would you get me a dictionary from the back of the room? And I could, usually a lot, especially for a lot of boys, large motor activities, they're like, damn right, I'll do it, okay? Now, once she's done it, great, that helped me out a lot. Now, we're moving over here to do this thing here. The likelihood that they're going to do the second thing after you've praised them for the first thing is increased. All right, it doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly increases it. One of the other things you've got to be careful of was that if I've got somebody who's having a problem and I go, okay, they're, I can't remember what your example was that you used, the first one, what were the two choices you gave?
Oh, I said, say you're sorry or go sit at your desk.
Okay, yeah, so as a student who had a problem, you can say you're sorry or go sit at your desk. That's not meeting her need. Whose need is that meeting? That's meeting your need, okay? We're not talking about two choices that meet my need. We're talking about two choices that meet the student's need. So what was she feeling, and what would be two things she could do that would help her? So if I'm feeling, in that case, it was a situation where the student may have felt disconnected or, kind of pushed away from the other kids, what would be two things that could help her feel not so isolated? Not, here's two solutions that fix that, that help me, kind of a thing. That make sense? Any other insights that people had as they were doing this or thinking about this? Anything that you're thinking about? Yeah.
This may not be the exact same thing, but I have a student who needs to have snack, and every time the person has snack, like go like this. So finally I've decided that she only needs to drink because I don't know how many times, probably since the beginning of the school year, she's been communicating she doesn't want that, and so that has solved the problem. But if they don't have the words to say I don't want the snack, their only choice is to clear the table. And so sometimes I think, we always have to have this, we have to have this, especially with non-verbal students, and we need to think outside the box. They're always doing one thing, they're communicating the same thing.
It's that whole issue of that, are we listening to what they're saying? Obviously this behavior's got a communicative intent, right? So I'm saying I don't want this, all right? So what, do I understand that? One of the little study that we did one time with girls with Rett syndrome, and again, it was because they don't have, the communication's a big issue for them. We were trying to get them to make choices with a computer. And we had food items that we knew they didn't like because we wanted to make sure that they were truly rejecting that as opposed to selecting those kinds of things. And that was an important part of helping them learn how to make selections, But yeah, so you've got to listen to what's going on. And the other thing is that a lot of our kids, we're talking about that there's a real gap in that they're not picking up things that other people pick up incidentally and need a lot more active instruction. So obviously knocking stuff away is not going to be a long-term solution for her in terms of communication. That's not going to get her someplace. So what am I going to do to hopefully broaden that communication? We had a little girl that was nonverbal. She was cerebral palsy. One of the things that we did is she would extend, and so she would sleep or she would extend and get kind of like really rigid in terms of stuff of escape stuff. So we literally started putting switches. When she'd extend, her head would hit a switch. And so one of the things her parent wanted her to learn was an issue for toileting. So when she'd stretch, she'd hit a thing, and whenever she'd hit that button, her butt hit porcelain. All right? And what she finally learned was that if I do that, that means I get to go to the bathroom. All right? And so she would do that. Well, then she started using it to escape tasks, and that was okay. She didn't really have to go to the bathroom. She just wanted to get away from this task. She'd hit that so she'd go to the bathroom. We'd just take the task with us. All right? And we're still doing this, all right? And then she would do something, and we were just watching her body to see where was she moving, and that's where we would put switches, and we just taught her different things. What this switch means this switch means this. We ended up giving her 16 different things she could talk about by activating different switches in the course of about 8 months. And it was a pretty, but we had to look at her to say, what can we use that she's giving us to teach her other ways to communicate? So it was kind of a challenging process. All right. Okay. So part of what we've got to think about is that the behavior that we engage in the different places is different. And so it's important that our staff know what this cycle looks like. So in that early part, what I'm trying to do is to identify what that need is and to give that empathetic I statement in 2 options. Once we get up here, now I've got to start, I'm not going to be doing a lot of talking here. Now it's very clear expectations. You're much better telling the person what you want them to do, not what you want them to not do. People are much more compliant with what you want than what you don't want. So if you want them, quiet hands, whatever's going on, whatever the situation might be, and it's going to be very, very few words, very, very clear. Coming down, this is where I see actually the most trouble, is that people want to start solving the problem now. This is not a place for solutions. This is a place for active listening. This is a place for helping the person realize that you're still with them, that you understand what's going on. They might even ask what's going to happen, and you may need to tell them, this is not the time to talk about that. Don't even worry about that right now. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we just want to get things back to where you're feeling okay about what's happening. Some people who are anxious, that may become a bit of a problem, all right? And you may have to, help them through that process. In some cases, you may have to foreshadow that, that there's nothing, we understand what's going on. This was no big deal. We all make mistakes. And help them get permission to realize that this is not like they're going to put on a hair shirt and everybody's going to beat them, kind of a thing. We're going to wait until they're back to baseline for solutions. So this kid is here swearing. I don't have to say we don't swear now. Most teachers think I have to because if I don't, everybody's going to start swearing. No, they're not. All right? And most kids know what's going on. And when you get down there going, okay, I understand you were upset. I understand that you were a little bit, frustrated about the math. Here's what's going now. Unfortunately, you chose to swear. What's the consequence for that? And you do it when they're back to baseline. All right. We actually just did this little study. It's actually my daughter was the senior author on this. She's getting her doctorate now in special education. Basically, these were all kids that showed some level of aggression, destruction, some elopement, and we only did the empathetic I statement and the 2 choices. And we said, okay, can we get the teachers to do that? And what we were looking is, can we reduce the number of aggressive acts, the number of times the kids elope or destroy property, and the number of times the kid ended up being restrained. We wanted to reduce this restraint, because restraints were pretty high in this situation too. And so, as you can see, actually the restraints aren't on this particular chart. They're going to be on the published article, which is going to be coming out in Education and Treatment of Children. But you can see that it basically came down. This particular student, it came down and then started going back up. And what we found was that the teacher was not using their self-control plan, and they were actually escalating the situation themselves. So we had to reteach the self-control plan. And, and then we got things back in place. Yeah?
Will you please give some more examples of the empathetic I statement?
It can be, part of that I got to think about is like, what's the need? So if I want you to be safe, I want you to be successful, I want you to, I want you to feel like you belong with the group, all right? Here's, so what do I see what's going on? Part of what that helps, it helps for a lot of our students, they're not necessarily recognizing what's going on. They're kind of caught up in it, and it gives you a chance to help them put a label on what's going on. It also gives them a chance to say, no, that's not the issue. Because we may have misunderstood, and if we misunderstood, go, okay, all right, well, let me try again, kind of a situation. So it's basically just a matter of your saying, I can kind of put myself in your shoes. I understand what you're going through. I think it's this. I sense that this is, and it's always done as kind of a question, because you're not the end all be all kind of a thing. You may be wrong. Does that make sense? I don't know if a lot of I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel successful. I want you to do this math well. I want you to gain all your points. If it's whatever seems to be the kind of issue I want sometimes kids get excited if they're in a situation and all of a sudden they've had problems and they think that now my day is terrible. No, I want you to have a good day. We're gonna rescue this day. This is gonna be okay. Right? I want you to have a good day. We can do this. All right. Whatever's going to be moving down in the process. Other questions, comments? Okay. It sounds stupid, but it really has been a very, very powerful tool.
I'm sorry, another example.
I'm sorry, do you mind stepping back? Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, just bat me in the head.
Some other examples of the choices as well, so that we can avoid, same choices that, like the examples earlier said, are more for us.
I think that's a hard thing to do because it's really very idiosyncratic to the kid. Because again, what you've got for motivation is interest and the fact that they can be successful. So if I'm crafting choices, they've got to be choices that kind of fit that kid. So does this hit the kid's interest level? Does this hit the kid's ability to do something? So if it's frustration, oftentimes, and part of the problem is often as a teacher, you may go, I know this kid could do this, but they don't believe they can do this. And it doesn't matter that you know they can. They work out of their head. All right? So I may have to step back a bit to get a subject area that they can have a level that, all right, I feel comfortable that I can do this successfully. So that takes that piece and makes it a comfort level. All right? I may not be able to manipulate both interest and difficulty, but I usually can manipulate one of those. If it's going to have to stay a little bit tricky, then it better be something the kid's really interested in. If it's going to be something that they're not particularly interested in, then it better be something they can do very, very well. All right? Safety is to me a much tougher one because oftentimes I've still got to have the kid in my sight. I oftentimes don't have a lot of personnel just standing around waiting for something to do. So to be able to craft those two options that allow the person some space and some time and that fit in with the student. So we were talking about this particular one student that just kind of froze. One of my choices might also always be, look, why don't we just stay right here, just stay calm. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Or if you want to, we've got a desk over there, you can go sit over there. All right? I think for a lot of our kids who have anxiety and fear kinds of issues, think about safe spots in your classroom. We're seeing more of a need for that with kids with mental health issues, that there's just a place they can go to. And they don't need permission to go. They can go anytime they're feeling anxious enough they need to go there. Once they're there, the task for you becomes getting them back here. And oftentimes you can set a timer and ask them, are you okay? No, all right, well, take another couple minutes. But it becomes an issue of not forcing them back, but inviting them back, getting them back in positively.
And I think an important way to think about it is like one of them is not a punishment. A lot of times.
Yeah, they're never punishment.
Do you want to go to the principal's office or do you want to do your work? And that's where the choices then aren't really choices anymore, but that's like the common mistake that we see is that the two choices given aren't really equal choices. It's like, do what I say, or this is the punishment I'm giving you, and that's not what this intervention is supposed to be. It's like
neither of those meet the child's need. Both of those are yours. Okay.
So you can do things like, do you want to do this on the computer or on the paper? Do you want a pencil or do you want a marker? Do you want to do it on your desk or on the carpet? You can write it or you can dictate it to me. You can do a PowerPoint. You can write an essay. You can, if you can change the nature of the task. Sometimes we'll do that in the front end, for kids, especially some kids who have some issues in terms of getting them engaged in the task. This is usually the kid is escalating. If I don't get them to come back down, it's going to get worse. So this is, and I'm not committing that this is what I'm going to do every time. This is to stop this. Then we're going to sit down and go, what the hell happened here? Why did this start getting into an escalation? Did we miss something? Are we asking this kid to do stuff he can't do? What's going on here? Because we've done something that didn't quite click, or something's not clicking, that we're having this crisis. So we're going to look at that, and then oftentimes that'll change the child's plan. We're going to talk about that here in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk about the debriefing kind of a situation. So I'm going to just throw this out. U.S. Department of Education in 2012 put out an issue around restraint and seclusion only because escape and avoidance is the non-compliance that oftentimes gets teachers and staff members and teachers to start touching kids. And sometimes it's pretty bizarre. I mean, like I'm working with a school in Hammond, and they have a little guy there who comes in, disrobes in the front of the school, and starts swearing like a sailor.
right? And what people want to do is pick him up and carry him off, right? Is he doing anything dangerous? No. There is no way you can touch this kid because he's got his clothes off and he's swearing. Now that doesn't mean I can't get a couple people with blankets. That doesn't mean, and then we sat down and said, okay, this has happened a couple of times. We've got to think about what's going on. He doesn't come in the front door anymore. Part of his plan is we've changed the entrance he comes into. We did a whole different protocol for this kid because coming into school is a problem for him. He gets very upset and very anxious, and so we're going to do it. If he wants to disrobe on door E, do it. Knock your socks off. We don't care, right? And swear like a sailor. And when you're done, math's over here, okay? We're not going to worry about it. Oh, sorry. Child's behavior poses an imminent danger of serious physical harm to self or others. That's a pretty important line to have. I'm sorry it didn't show up. That's the key line, okay? Now, when they mean imminent, that means it's happening now. Not that it happened 4 times before. History doesn't predict future in this kind of a situation. If you go to a due process hearing or a legal hearing, and you go, well, but every third, he's done this 3 times before, and every time it ended up that he hit somebody, that's not going to cover you. Okay, what did he do right at that point that made you understand it was imminently dangerous? Well, he was standing within striking range with his hand up, and he was saying, I'm going to hit you. All right, now that looks pretty imminent to me. All right. Serious injury means it would require immediate medical attention. So just that I push you does not mean imminent danger. Just because I slap you does not mean imminent danger. If I'm this big, there is no imminent danger to that. That does not warrant restraint. That is really hard for our teachers to understand. Okay? Basically, they're looking at it. Boy, this doesn't show up much. Very good. Let's see if this one. All right, so. All right, it's going to do that. All right, so you can kind of think about this kind of situation. If I've got the activity is a threat or an attempt, am I just saying I'm going to do it, or did I actually attempt to do this? All right, and was it going to be a minor injury or a serious injury? So if I stand here and I say, I want to slap you, all right, first of all, from this distance, can I slap her? Is there any threat here at all? There's no threat here at all, okay? If I stand here and say, you better give me what I want or I'm going to slap you. All right, now I could do it. I'm close enough, right? And if I slapped her, given my size and that maybe could have been serious, right? Maybe not, maybe it could be. So that's what you got to look at. And when you describe it, you got to talk about it in lines of what's happening. If it's a minor injury that's being threatened, that's considered simple assault. Okay? And where this becomes important is just in a few minutes here. If the person actually attempts it, so now, let's say I'm 12 years old, she's my teacher, she's asking me to do something, she's leaning across, and I swing at her. Now I've actually attempted it, but it would have been a minor injury. That's considered assault and battery. If I threaten or actually attempt something that would be a serious injury, this is aggravated assault. Okay? Now, it becomes important as you're working with your teachers to actually have them think about, this is another place where you were saying we actually pull old crisis reports and have people go back through and say, tell me what is the behavior here? What was going on here in terms of what's happening? We've got to be real good at this. And this is because right now we're seeing issues where it's resulting in legal activities. There were 2 staff members here in Illinois that restrained a girl. They ended up restraining her on the ground. She regurgitated, she aspirated and died. They were both charged with manslaughter. Okay? So we're talking serious stuff here. So knowing what's going on and what you're talking about, it becomes important that your staff know when they can and when they can't do things. Okay. I'm going to come over here so I'm not standing in the sight line of what's going on. All right. We have lots of our clients, our students, engage in challenging behavior, right? For the most part, that's why we're in special education and the kinds of things that we do. We deal with kids with challenging behavior. Right? That should be handled by your behavior intervention plan, by your regular protocols in your school. That's business as usual. All right? So if I swear at you, if I tell you to do things that are physiologically impossible, if I throw my books on the floor, if I spit, all those things are normal, challenging behaviors. That's what we do stuff for. That's our business. Okay. If I'm a simple assault, I'm still doing that crisis communication or that primary backup. My major, as far as reasonable response, is crisis communication. I'm using language. I'm talking to you. I'm signing to you. I'm giving you indications. I'm staying out of the situation. Because at this point, all you're doing is threatening. I'm going to try to use my language and communication skills to give you the space you need to calm down. That's the reasonable response there. Anything beyond that's going to be generally viewed as above and beyond reasonable. If I engage in assault and battery, now I'm not just threatening, I actually tried to slap or do something that would be a minor injury. All right? You're still going to use your behavior plans, you're still going to use crisis communication, and you're going to get the hell out of the way. You move. I don't know how many times I'll see staff, the kid says, I'm going to smack you, and the staff stands right here and goes, well, you need to do what it's like, no, back away. Get out of the situation. They'll stand there and they'll get hit. It's like, are you nuts? Okay? Aggravated assault, still the plan. Still crisis communication. If I can stay out of the way, and possibly restraint. But it's possibly. And it's a lose-lose situation. There is no situation when you use restraint where you go, I had to do it. You never have to do it. And the minute you put your hands on somebody, you are responsible for what happens to that person.
What if it's self-abuse? What if it's self-abuse?
You're still going to have the same kind of issue here. Not all self-abuse is serious, right? And so I may still be in the same kind of situation. Some people try to get on, and again, remember that people get hurt in restraints. So we'll have kids that bite themselves, but their hand has got this huge callus. They've been biting it for years. It's not going to, they're not creating any huge tissue damage that isn't already there, all right? Trying to stop that may actually become more problematic than letting them do that or finding other ways to address that in terms of other aspects of the plan. On the other hand, I've got a kid who's pushing their eyeball back into their brain. Now I've got a whole other issue, okay? Now I've got a serious injury, and there I may have to actually get involved in terms of what's happening. But I'm going to make those decisions. Always make sure that you can talk very clearly about what was happening that made you, that I can answer. If I read the report, I could tell you, oh, that was aggravated assault because the person was close enough, that would have been a serious situation. All those things are answerable, all right? And I'm only bringing this up because this is a real hot issue right now for us.
What's your opinion of schools that get the police, local police involved, get the officer there, and sometimes takes the student away, and there could be a battery charge, which is a felony?
A lot of schools are choosing to do that simply because they don't want to have to mess with this kind of a thing, and so they're just going to call the police. The PR issues, and in fact, schools have still gotten in trouble with that, but then it's usually the school and the police department that gets sued. Remember that our job is to care. When you took a job as a teacher, you took a job to care. As a police officer, their job is to protect. That's a very different job. All right, they're not going to. So, for example, I'm in a legal case right now with a school in Indiana that's the school's being sued, the police department's being. They tased a kid. Now the kid weighs 380 pounds. He's 6'4". He is a big boy, and he is a very aggressive boy. And he was not staying in the classroom. He was threatening, but he wasn't. He actually didn't even meet aggravated assault. And the police tased him. Okay? It happened in the school, at the police. The police were called by the school, so the school's got liability, the police have liability. I don't know where it'll go. But police are also starting to be questioned about this kind of thing in terms of what's going on. So it doesn't necessarily free you up. I think some schools are doing that, but we're seeing anything like first graders being taken out of the school in handcuffs, and the PR issue that creates for the school. Now, in some cases, these kids can be pretty dangerous. Just because they're first graders doesn't mean they can't be dangerous, but I'm not sure that's what's going to go on in terms of what's happening. But we don't know, and I mean, I don't know what's going to happen if the feds actually say we're going to take away the school's right to use this. I don't know what that's going to mean for some of the kids that we work with that are potentially dangerous.
Sorry, I have one more question. Is there a level of, different levels of restraint? Or is it just restraint? You know what I mean? Like if a kid is, for example, grabbing toys and throwing them at other students. So if I grab his hand and hold it down.
You're restrained.
That's it. That's restraint. That's classified as.
Yeah, and you can get. Yeah, if you haven't done it, I would suggest that you go on and read the federal definition of what is restraint, what is seclusion, because a lot of people seclude kids, they don't even know they're secluding them. Because you don't need a room to be in seclusion. All you got to do is to be in an area that you can't leave. If I'm going to stop you from leaving this area, you are in seclusion. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that I'm saying I don't want you to leave, but if you'd actually get up and do it, you could. Because heck, most of us have kids that, just being in school, period, is kind of a, you're supposed to be here, but obviously if I got up and left, nobody's going to probably try to stop me from doing it. It's a tough issue, and it's a thorny issue for schools, and it's changed a lot of what we're believing, and because this escape and avoidance thing, teachers think they're in local parentis, and if they could do it as a parent, then they can do it as a teacher, and that's just not true. And your teachers need to know that because this is becoming a legal issue for them. Questions? Yeah.
Is adaptive equipment considered mechanical restraints, and if students ask for that, is that okay to use mitts and things if they're scratching themselves and they're asking? Usually if it's got a medical order to it, it's fine. And like things that we use, like Rifton chairs and things that we use for posture or for OT kind of issues, that's not restrained, even though I may be restrained. All right. On the other hand, if I've got a kid, let's say, who's in a wheelchair, and I put their tray on because I don't want them to get up and move around, I've just put them in restraint. I've seen schools that where they'll take a T-shirt and put it up over the shirt. So you're sitting here, and they'll take the kid's shirt and put it over the chair because then they can't get up, or they'll take their backpack. And they'll put the backpack back here, and then they put it through the kid's shoulders, so the kid's arms are here, and the backpack. Those are mechanical restraints. Okay, and schools are getting into trouble for those. Classic example was Racine, Wisconsin, was using Rifton chairs for their kids with autism. They were simply just strapping them in and saying, and the vice principal got on TV and said, "What else are we supposed to do with these kids?" Okay, cost that school district $25,000 with one family.
I think that is where it becomes difficult, because I'm looking at your structure that you've got within now. The last piece is possibly restraint, but these other pieces, the primary backups and the plans, the crisis communication, even evasion, professionals are not appropriately taught how to use those skills, and so because the teacher or the social worker even doesn't know how to use an appropriate crisis communication, it goes straight to restraint, because at that point, literally, what else? I think that's really frustrating personally for me, but I think it's frustrating for a lot of professionals.
It is from the standpoint, it's kind of like, my gut level is that if you check with your school district, they've got somebody who's trained as a crisis team. Around here, Crisis Prevention Institute out of Milwaukee does probably 90% of the training in terms of restraint training. Unfortunately, theirs is more restraint training than it is actually not to get into restraint. Some of the others are better at actually teaching you how to prevent that than just how to do it, how to restrain. Not that they have a prevention piece, but it's not the biggest part of their training. So that because by law, schools have to have a crisis plan. You've got to have somebody certified. The dilemma is that the persons who are doing lots of the restraint are the typical teacher in the classroom who's never been talked to about restraint at all. Right? And again, remember, the research suggests that your kids, especially your younger kids, are at a very, very high risk of being restrained. And the other dilemma comes down to that any time I'm going to restrain some of your students, I'm taking away their ability to speak, because now I've got their hands. How are they going to communicate their needs?
What about runners? I just share this for runners out of this.
if there's an imminent danger. Just because they're out of the building doesn't necessarily mean there's an imminent danger. So what I've got to say is, what's the danger? They don't even take, well, they're going to run in the street. Is the street busy? Okay? There's a lot of streets that aren't a problem. You can run in them all day long. All right? So it can't be, well, that could happen. Are they doing something? And right now, is it imminently dangerous? Then I can. If not, you can't. And it's crazy, but and it's,
So we have a student who runs into a non-busy street, and that's okay, just let them be in the non-busy street?
It's not okay, but we're not saying you can't do anything, but you can't restrain it.
Okay, so for all purposes, it's okay, just trying to obviously still get him back into the school.
Oh, yeah.
But then once he starts to go towards the busy street that's right down the road, then we restrain him in the middle of the road?
Well, hopefully you would restrain him before he got to the busy street, but yeah. The issue what you've got to do is the onus is on you to show there was imminent danger. So I'm on a non-busy street that's teeing into a busy street. I've stopped him on the non-busy street because he's 6 feet from the busy street. I probably could defend that. All right? I did it 3 blocks away on a non-busy street. Why? Because somewhere over there's a damn busy street. And God, he could have gotten there. You're probably not going to get very far. Okay? So, it literally is, and anytime you do it, you've just got to be able to clearly defend it about what's going on. And again, think about the fact that 200 kids die in this process. They didn't intend to kill them. If you want a really, sick situation, go on to YouTube and put in Corey Foster. Corey Foster was a young man who was playing basketball in a school program, and they wanted him to stop playing basketball, and he wouldn't stop. He just kept shooting the baskets. It ends up 7 people come in, and they're restraining him with 7 people, and he dies in the restraint. What's absolutely heartbreaking to me is that there's other kids out playing basketball, and they're not even stunned that there are 7 people restraining this guy. It's like this must happen there all the time, because it didn't even raise anybody's eyebrows as there was anything to be concerned about, that there are 7 people on this kid. All right? That's the kind of, and so it gets serious. And so it's just a matter of thinking about what's going on. And it's not like a restrainer can do nothing. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can do. But what we've got to do is teach our teachers what those things are. We haven't done that. All right? And your population is at a higher risk. It's more important that your teachers know it. All right. The other thing we got to keep remembering is that just because I was in aggravated assault doesn't mean I'm still in aggravated assault. So I've got a brick, and I'm going to throw it at Amy. All right. Now, if I've got this brick and I am this far away, and I threw this brick and it hit her, would that be seriously injurious? Absolutely. Okay. Now, what would be Amy's best action if I've got this brick and I'm threatening to... Yeah, this is not a time to move over and try to restrain me. This is a time to use evasion. Get the hell out of Dodge, right? Okay? Now, once I throw the brick, where am I at now? I might be at challenging behavior because there is nothing anymore that's imminently dangerous. But your teacher is probably left their baseline and they're wanting some payback. All right? And they're afraid he's going to pick up a second brick. And if he picks up a second brick, we're back in the situation again. But until I pick up the second brick, we're not. All right? So again, just things to throw out there to keep in mind. All right. We're an ethical dilemma in that we're actually asking people to do more stuff. We've got greater numbers of kids with mental health issues. There's far more risk that we're going to have problems now than ever before in schools. And we've actually got fewer degrees of freedom. So it means we have to have a much more talented staff in terms of de-escalation, in terms of being able to think about things than we've ever had before. Okay. Talk about a little guy here, Randy, 8 years old. He's been deaf since birth, average intelligence, diagnosed with ADHD combined type. He has significant deficits in social skills. And if he's upset, he just simply puts his head down, or if he's pushed, he'll run out of the classroom. Have you ever seen any kids like this? Okay. All right. Got a math instruction. Mrs. James is writing problems on the overhead projector, asking the students to copy these in their small whiteboards. They were then directed to solve the problem, showing their work, and when instructed to do so, each child was to display their answers. Okay, and they're all sitting there being very eager to do their work. And we get a little situation here. Randy starts to try to do the lesson. He begins to look upset. He's displayed increased movement. He starts looking around the room, divert his attention from the task, and he mumbles to himself that starts to protest that this shit's stupid, and nobody cares about this crap. All right, the teacher moves towards Randy and asks, "Is everything okay?" Randy says, "I don't know why we can't do this as a class or with partners. This is really boring." The teacher says, "I know you can do this. Do this if you try. Just do your best." Randy says, "I hate this shit." The teacher says, "Randy, you need to watch your language. You can't cuss in this classroom." Randy says, "Don't tell me what to do. You're not what I can and can't do. You're not my boss." The teacher says, "Randy, we have to get along and do what's asked. Otherwise, this class just won't work." In a loud voice, Randy says, "I'm tired of this bullshit. I hate this effing class." And Randy starts to get up and exit the classroom. The teacher steps in his way to block his exit and says, "Sit down right now and do what I've asked you to do. Stop swearing." Randy says, "F you, I'm out of here." The teacher moves towards Randy, grabs his arm with him to move him back to his seat. Randy shakes her hand off his arm, pushes past her, and exits the classroom. Might we see something like that happen in the school? Okay. One of the things that we have started doing and is the fact that whether it becomes a real crisis, whether it be a restraint kind of a thing, doesn't matter, but just when you've got a problem, is that we've found that we're having to help teachers realize what took place, and we're not looking to find blame. We're not trying to look to say, did you do the right thing, the wrong thing, or anything else, because I really believe everybody does the best that they can in the moment with the information they have, so we're not looking for, but let's take a look at what took place, and did what we do make sense? Okay, so, and part of that we do this is we bring the people who are involved in it, and if possible, we actually bring the student in. If we can't bring the student in for some reason or another, one staff member interviews, talks with the student, and they come into that meeting as the student. So I'm here to represent the student's point of view. Okay, what was going on in this situation? So, they might be saying, if you'd have just left me alone, everything would have been fine. All right, so we're at least going to try to get some sense of where's the student coming from. And we start to do a debriefing. All right, so I'm going to step out. If I step here, will this be better? Yes. Okay, no, maybe not so. So we just basically kind of just go through here and say, okay, whoop. So the teacher assigns the task, all right, and Randy starts to look around. He's agitated. And he says, this shit's stupid. The teacher says, is everything okay? Okay. Did this comment of the teacher make things better, worse, or was it neutral? Worse? Worse? Anybody say neutral? Neutral? Okay. Most people say either worse or neutral. All right, so great. Why can't we do this as a class or with partners? Try to do your best. Better, worse, neutral. I hate this shit. Watch your language, you can't cuss. Don't tell me what to do, you're not my boss. We got to get along. Tired of this bullshit, I hate this effing class. Stop swearing, sit down. F you, I'm out of here, starts to exit. Teacher grabs his arm, attempts to move him back to his seat. Worse, okay. Was what the teacher did, from the teacher's perspective, do you think the teacher would have said, or most of you would have said, that what they did was reasonable? Yeah. One of the dilemmas that we have is think back to your days of student teaching. Remember when your faculty said you need to be reflective teachers? Reflect on your practice, right? Now I remember when I was teaching, we used to go out on Fridays and drink beer. I used to want to reflect on a Budweiser. That was my idea, reflect. part of the issue is that you can't reflect on what you don't know you're doing. And usually when you reflect, you ask, was what I did reasonable? The teacher here probably was, at least up until she grabbed his arm, was probably engaged in reasonable behavior. Was it effective behavior? It wasn't effective. And part of the thing is that we're asking ourselves the wrong question. Did this get me where I wanted to be? Did this get the student back towards baseline? Did we get back in the lesson, or did we go further out? And so what we've been doing is we've been, in a lot of our schools, we've actually been going through and grabbing, like, crisis things, incident reports, anything that we can have that are real, change the name to protect the guilty, all right, alter them up a little bit, maybe mesh a couple, 2 or 3 of them together, and we're taking like 15 minutes one morning a week, or one morning a month, maybe the 3rd Wednesday, we're going to meet, and we put it up, and we are just going through and say, let's look at this and say, what other options could we have done? What are some of the things we might have offered as choices? So we're trying to give our teachers practice on building those, what are the options I can do besides grab the kid or nothing? And we've had incredible luck with it. So thinking of this situation, what else could have happened in this situation that might have made things different? Yeah.
Well, I like how the student himself gave 2 choices right there.
Absolutely.
It's like, I probably would have said, hey, pick a partner.
Yeah, Randy's got a good point. Hey, some of you might be better off if we, I'm going to have a little group down here if you want to come down, or we're going to have some partners. What do you think? Probably wouldn't have changed the lesson much at all as far as the nature of what she was trying to get done. And now, do we have teachers who their knee-jerk reaction is always no? Yeah. It's like, you're smiling, you must be doing something wrong, right? Because we don't smile at school. There's nothing to smile about here, right? Okay. So it's, it's the issue of it. And oftentimes, our students will give us options. They'll tell it if we'll just listen. So we could have said, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's say I missed that bus. It went by. Now we're on down a little bit. What could we have done then? Anything? Could we still do that? Could we go back to that? Absolutely. All right. Again, could she have just, even for just him, issued, hey, I want you to be successful. I understand this is probably a little bit boring. We could do this or we could do this, right? Might that have helped with this kid? Try to do your best, or I know you can do it. We do that a lot. Usually is not a terribly satisfying comment, because if the kid thought they could do it, they'd already be doing it. Most of us want to be competent, right? Questions?
I think the other thing with this little dialogue is it's long enough. By now, they've gotten a lot of other high school kids in it, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's unlikely that it's only him talking to her or talking.
Yeah. Yeah, you've probably got
back and forth. You've got other kids now swearing or whatever, cheering them on.
at least supporting what's happening, yeah, in terms of what's going on. And he's going to have a hard time backing out of it now, too.
I just have a comment. One of my friends one time said that the wonderful thing about being an adult is that you don't have to be good at everything, but yet we expect children to be good. So when you say, I know you can do it, I mean, I am not going to ever be the Olympic ice skating person, ever. Other people are, not me. And I can say that, but we expect children to be good at everything. And some people struggle.
Well, or we expect people to make the right decision all the time. So I just lost 118 pounds over the last year. All right? Yeah. So part of the issue is that every morning when I go to the donut shop where I get my coffee, it is a battle for me not to order the cinnamon roll that I used to always get. All right? Now, I can do that, all right, and I actually have been very successful at doing that, okay? Now, this morning or this afternoon, going through the lunch line in terms of there's salad and there's pizza, okay, I can have a couple pieces of pizza. I went back and got another piece of pizza, okay? So while I know I can say no, I don't always do that, do I? All right? And I think that we forget that sometimes, we expect kids to always do what they're supposed to do. We don't do always what we're supposed to do, right? In fact, probably in the course of any given day, we can probably name a number of things that we knew we shouldn't have done that we did, okay? Those of you that have been in this session with me before know that one of the things I usually talk about is my speeding. If I get in a car, I'm speeding, all right? I know when I get in the car tonight going home, I'm going to be on Route 355 and I am going to be speeding, right? All right? I know it's not supposed to do it, but I'm going to be doing it. Okay. So some of the common triggers, certain given subjects, messages of failure, multiple stressors for that basket student, too long or too demanding of work, okay? Again, most of us have the ability, if you're at home grading papers, doing whatever, you want to get up, go get a cup of coffee, do it, you can do it, and we do that all the time. But in school, we want kids to sit for long periods of time and stay engaged in a given task. And for some people, that's just not the way they work. Peer relations, social problems, huge for your population, huge issues for your population, okay? Sensory issues, in some cases, it's, for example, if I'm pushing on my eyes, I'm getting that sparkle, right? And I will push my eye all the way into my brain, all right, to get some kind of a sensory payoff. Also sensory issues from the standpoint of just becoming dysregulated, okay, in terms of what's going on. And one of the challenges that we have is the fact that as much as we push the whole idea of sensory integration, there's not an ounce of empirical research to suggest that that really works. I still suggest it. I still put it in things but there's no real empirical valid information saying that we should do that. But there's a lot of anecdotal, okay? But we know that we have kids who are off sensory, from a sensory standpoint. We're just not sure that is the sensory integration activity, or is there was an adult interacting with this kid in a positive way that may have made some differences. We don't know, okay? Issues at home, somebody mentioned that. We've got issues in terms of what's going on at home. All right. Some things, and we've talked some of this stuff before, but I want to hit some of these things that are a little bit different. Boy, I should not have used red on this at all. I am so sorry about that. That basically says student, it says reading decoding skills, reading comprehension, math computation, and attending skills. Make sure your teachers know the skill level of your kids. If you're having kids that are going out into other situations where they're not with you, what is their mastery reading level? So if I'm reading that I can read this and understand it, know what that level is and talk to your teachers. We have to reclaim our roles as special educators. And in many cases, I need to be able to go in and say, look, your textbook is written at the 9th grade level. This kid reads at the 4th grade, 3rd month. He is not going to be able to read your textbook to get this information. That does not mean he's stupid. That does not mean he can't learn the content. He's not getting it from your text. How are we going to get it to him? And that becomes a part of how you begin to reclaim your role and to begin to build that issue in terms of why we need to be collaborating, why I need to know about what the lesson plans are, why I need to know about what we're going to be doing so we can give this kid a seat on the bus. Okay. Help kids know what's going on. Again, talkouts are the #1 thing kids get reprimands for, and too many reprimands are a big issue. If I get lots of messages of failure, and you've got kids who are having problems in terms of communication. How do they communicate? What do they do? How do they involve things? What's supposed to be happening? That CHAMPS issue in terms of just helping them understand what am I able to do here right now? And it gives a nice visual as well as just somebody saying what it should happen, and the person has to retain that in their head. This way I can look up and I know for this activity, here's what's being expected. Don't be afraid to build this into IEPs in terms of BIPs. I do that in a lot of situations where I see, and it pisses the teachers off, but I don't care. If I've got a kid who needs the visual, I'm building it in, and then if they're choosing not to do it, they're violating that kid's IEP. Okay? I used to have the pizza plates. Basically, the old BD teacher had me, there was kind of a situation that the red plate was up, red side of the plate was up. That means you had to raise your hand before you spoke. Green side was up. You could speak as long as you didn't talk on somebody else's language. All right? And it was just a signal that gave them a chance to see what was being expected. Right? How we give kids messages that they have a problem becomes an issue too. That I've got to be sure that I'm building ships for the seas that I'm sailing. So if I've got a student who engages in a high rate problem behavior, whatever system I'm using in the classroom has to take into consideration that this is a high rate behavior. So this happens, how many of you have ever seen this thing where they've got the little envelopes and they got the yellow and the green, yellow, red card? All right, and if I do something wrong, I move from my green card to my yellow card, then from my yellow card to my green card. I'm little Ricky with ADHD. School starts at 8:30. When will I be on red? And in most classrooms, I'm on red for what? The rest of the day. All right, so what the hell do I have to lose now? Not a thing, right? There's not a you've shot the whole deal, okay? I can't live on 3 cards. Just like some kids need more drill and practice in math, some kids need more opportunities. So and we learn by opportunities to respond. So I don't want just one all day long. I want to restart this as many times as I possibly can across the course of a day. So I might go, and usually this is for younger kids, I might go from the beginning of school till morning recess. All right? That's an hour and 45 minutes. All right? In an hour and 45 minutes, on average, how many times does she talk out? 12. Okay? If she talks out 12 times on average in that time, I want her to have at least 14 or 15 cards. So on average, she will be on something besides red. All right? I'm going to pull a card every time. Now, some teachers want to make this really difficult. They may go green, a little bit lighter green, a little bit lighter green yet, a kind of a yellow green, a green yellow, now a yellow, right? And then a yellow orange, and it's like, green, a whole bunch of yellows and a red. Okay. But I'm going to pull a card every time, but the odds are most of the time she's not going to be on red. Because we do not win by our failures, we learn by our successes. Okay? So some kids may have 3. The bulk of kids would have 3. Some kids might have 9. Some kids have 15. Some kids have 64. Okay? And you get what you need. All right? At recess time, if you are on yellow, you come and stand by me for 3 minutes before you can go play. If you are on red, you come stand by me for 5 minutes and then you can go play. And when we come back in, we're all on green again. And we're going to start over and we're going to go till lunchtime. And if you're on yellow, you're going to stand by me for 3 minutes and then you're going to go to lunch. And if you're on red, you're going to stand by me for 5 minutes and you're going to go to lunch. And I've got a system. So many systems serve 2 purposes. I'll go into classrooms that have a class dojo where they're giving points and taking points away. If what I'm interested in is counting behaviors, great. If I'm interested in changing behaviors, that plan sucks. All right? Because what happens is the kids who really need it are on, I was in one classroom like 2 weeks ago, this kid was at -80. Right? And that's pretty typical for him. It's like, this isn't helping this kid, right? It's almost becoming, how many down can I get? Let's see if I can make 100 today, all right? It's got to be something that helps them grow. It helps them identify what they're doing well. The other bad one that I see are the clip situations, where I've got the green clip and it moves down or it moves up. That's basically, I'm pissed and I want you to know I'm pissed, go move your clip. All right? Because it's not predictable enough to be able to move it enough to be able to change the behavior of kids who need to have a behavior change. If I've only got 3 times I'm going to have a behavior problem, I don't have a problem. Right? Unless you're using that for something like hitting, where it's a low rate, high intensity behavior. And if you put your hands on somebody, then you move a clip, then it might make sense. But when they just use it, it's kind of like, that's it. It's anything that pisses me off enough to say move your clip. That's what this is about. All right? And that's really all it becomes. And it's just more for me to feel good because I got you to move a clip. Okay. Things like that are high rate, like talkouts, oftentimes, again, some kids are very, very sensitive to being told no. In some cases, I can put stuff that's a behavior that's not, Karen here talks out, Karen, right, yeah, 62 times. Okay? But the rest of you all talk out too. You're just not quite in her league. Okay? Okay? Nobody's in Karen's league. Karen is she is a force to be reckoned with all on her own. Okay? But I've decided that I want to deal with talk out. So what I might do is say, you know what? I can probably keep this in my head for 15 minutes, that I can be aware of it. I'm going to put up, and in 15 minutes on average, in my big data collection systems, I carry change in my pocket, so I may for 15 minutes just keep track of on the average how many times people talk out. Karen talks out 12 times in 15 minutes. And the rest of the class together, you talk out another 12 times. So 24. I might start with 30 marks on the board. For little kids, I like Velcro stars because I love the sound when you tear them off. Right? Okay. And so I have these marks on the board. When I was a high school teacher, I just literally had just marks on the blackboard. That's how old I am. We had blackboards. Okay. So I'm teaching. All of a sudden, Karen talks out. I take away a mark. Do I have to stop teaching to do this? No. Keep right on teaching. I don't have to do anything else. Somebody else talks out. I take one away. A little bit later, I take one away. Okay. And Amy? Amy's my good BD kid, right? I take one away from Amy, and Amy says, I don't give a rat's ass about your silly marks. What do I do now? How about now, Amy? You care now? Nope. How about now? You let me know when you start caring, Amy. All right. Amy knows I took one away. I know I took one away. I do not have to beat her to death. This is not a process. This is a process, not an event. Okay? So I just take the one away, and I realize she has a hard time taking consequences. Now, down the road, I may take one away. She doesn't say anything. I might say, hey, Amy, can I say? Usually have a hard time taking consequences. Today, I took 2 marks away. Both times you moved right on. I'm really proud of you. What might Amy say? Just because I'm saying something nice doesn't mean she's going to go, oh, that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard, Mr. Van Agerthing. My job is to give feedback. Okay? But what I need to have is a system that this allows Karen not to feel like Karen, right? It's put in, and her number's already built into the number, so that it's nobody's being punished by virtue of it because I started with a number higher than the average. That make sense?
But then if you take them all down, then there's a consequence for...
Usually what I do is if there's any left, it means something good. So if it's like a 15-minute thing, I might say, then usually it's like, again, although I did it for high school kids. For my high school, what I did was at the end of the period, if there was any left of the last 5 minutes, you got that 5 minutes to socialize. All right? For little kids, oftentimes it'll be a short time. And it also, because as a teacher, and I'm first doing this to keep it in my mind that I'm not going to be answering these questions and I'm really going to take these marks away, it's a short time. I might have you spell a word. So when you spell fun or game, then we're going to have 5 minutes of a more fun activity. Okay? The odds are, over half the time, there will be a mark left, but not always. Okay? This is the thing to how to set this up, and you can also do it for one kid. You can also do this where it's all Karen. These are all Karen's marks, and Karen can earn something for everybody. Okay, so if there's any marks left, you all get reinforced because of Karen. And she is now the hero. Okay? One of the most powerful tools that we have in the arsenal of behavior management tools is check in and check out when it's done right. It is almost never done right. Okay? Basically it's a situation where I've got somebody comes in the morning and you want a cheerleader to meet this kid. I am so much in your corner. We are going to have a wonderful day, Allie. Things are going to be just great. And here are the 4 things you're working on. Allie, which one are you going to work on most today? What do you really want to do? Oh, I'm going to do the talk. Okay, we're going to try to do this whole thing of not talking out. Wonderful, Allie. I know you can do it. All right? And now Allie's going to go and do her day. At the end of the day, she's going to meet with me again, and I'm going to celebrate her successes, not point out her failures. Okay? And when we have these sheets, they're based on what's going on now. So if for example, on task is on task more than 65% of the time. If the most she shows me right now is 65%, that's where I start. I don't say when you're at 80, when she's never given me 80, because then every day at the end it's going to be, well, you didn't quite make it. And it becomes this kind of really kind of, bleh, right? Again, having lost weight, one of the big things in any kind of weight loss thing is you have to go someplace and see people, you step on a scale and people look at it, right? If when you stepped on the scale and you only lost a pound, you went, probably wouldn't keep going back, right? You lose 4 ounces and they're going, yes! Are you a superstar or what? Yes, I am. I can. This is what, So that's what you're doing here, okay? For some kids, they need it quicker than like the end of the period. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that this is a feedback tool, not a responsibility tool. You will get the teachers who go, he didn't bring his slip. If he doesn't bring his slip, I can't mark it. You know, when he has a job and he doesn't take his tools, he's going to get fired. All right? Not everything is a hammer. This is not a responsibility tool. This is a feedback tool. These are behaviors we're saying we want this kid to show us. We are going to pay attention when he does. We're going to celebrate when he does. If he didn't bring a slip, damn it, reach in your drawer and pull another one out. Right? It's only important if you can give him feedback. Right? For some kids, I can't wait a whole period. Either cognition, age, a number of things play into it. I may have just a number of key behaviors I'm looking at anytime I'm walking by. Hey, wow, Allie, you're in your seat. Good job. Right? And Allie is always in her seat because she's the most sedentary kid in the whole world. Right? And I put this on there because I'm pretty much sure I'm always going to be able to give her a mark for that. All right? She's never paying attention, but she's in her seat. Okay? So I can go, you're in your seat. What might that do to her paying attention? It might actually pull her into being paying attention. So I can actually increase the likelihood of seeing some of these other behaviors by attending to the ones that really aren't a problem. Okay? But I'm going to give her as much. Now, this is not data. This is behavior change, because actually on a bad day, you're probably going to have more marks than on a good day. Because if she's having a rough day paying attention, I better get over there every time I see her paying attention going, wow, you're paying attention, good job. Right? Because I want her to celebrate that she's doing the right thing. Now, if I want to make it data, let's say I'm looking at things like following directions, I can put little hash marks on how many times the direction was given. I can count how many stars she got, and so for that 15 minutes, I know she complied 9 out of 12 times. Now I've got a data sample. That's all I do. Do that a couple times a week, you're fine. We usually collect way too damn much data. Okay? All right. For those of you who, just because this is about behavior, we've talked about this before, I think this website's changed, but if you go to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction website, put the word blueprints into their little search engine, you will get to this document. What we basically did is we sat down with a number of teachers and we said, I think we identified 18 key behaviors, and we said, okay, if this kid is doing this for attention, what should we do proactively, what should we do reactively, and what should we never do? If he's doing it for justice and revenge, if he's doing it for power and control, if he's doing it for peer affiliation. It's a nice tool for us to share with teachers or with teams that are building these behavior plans to realize that the function makes a tremendous difference on the intervention. So I've got the same behavior, but across these different functions, the intervention's very different. Okay, and so it gets people thinking function-wise. It also has some great ideas and some things that you can get from. It's a 68-page document, so print it out on school paper and ink. Not your own. Okay. And no one likes change but a wet baby. Okay. We are asking people to change. We are asking people, when you're getting kids who are trying to escape and avoid, it's usually because you're asking them to do something that they're not comfortable doing. You are going to go back and you are going to be doing things that you may not be comfortable, or you're going to ask your teachers to do things they're not comfortable doing. Realize that it requires support. Adults are no different than kids when it comes to behavior change. It's the same issues. They still have to be reinforced. They still have to have feedback. They still got to be successful. So, set systems up for them to be successful with it. I'm going to shut up and see what questions people have. Any questions? Any concerns? Anybody care? Everybody's saying if anybody raises their hand, I'm going to rip your arm off and beat you with it. Right? Yes?
Okay, so we kind of discussed two different ways to, well, I swear I was being so, you have two schools of thought on monitoring behavior and increasing behaviors that you want. So, we just talked about taking the stars away. Doesn't have to be a big deal, but we could see that you're taking the stars away. But when you're trying to increase behaviors, you are...
Why aren't you giving stars? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's just like which one...
Yeah. I'll tell you, I would love to go to a teacher and say, if you see them doing the right thing, give them a star. It would be far better. The problem is we don't do it.
Right.
Teachers suck at doing that. We are very good at catching bad behavior. All right? So the goal here, this is still a reinforcement program. This is actually called differential reinforcement of lower rate behaviors. That's why you start with a larger number than average. All right? And so what you're doing is you're reinforcing lower and lower and lower levels of the behavior. So it's still a reinforcement program. It's just based off of reducing the number of times they do something wrong. Does that make sense? So some people will argue about that, and the only, I mean, I would love it if people would say, yeah, no, you know, every 3 minutes, if you didn't see it, put a star up, wonderful. They'd never do it.
Yeah, I guess I've just been told like it's just so negative to, you know, oh, you never take something away from their chart. You always just, you know, keep giving them stickers. But I'm like, I don't really see a lot of, for some kids, yeah, that's great and it works when you're reinforcing that behavior. Other times, like, it doesn't work. And I'm like, is it really, am I really like just breaking this kid when I, you know, take a star away?
And you might. I mean, part of the thing is that if anything worked for everybody, it would be, you know, we had my greatest story for this is we had a situation where there was kids that were swearing. And there was really one kid who was really doing a lot of swearing. But there were a number, and especially, you know, you were mentioning that when one starts, the other one started adding into it. And so they had swearing up as the issue, and I think it was like 8 stars or something and that lasted for a half hour, and they'd take one away, and that was, you know. And there was a little guy there in the class with autism who never swore, but the stars made him crazy. It's like, there are stars, and they take the stars away. So he would come in and go, shit, 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 shit. Take all that. Okay, now, all right, good. All right. Now I'm not anxious anymore. Life is good. Okay. And so we basically had to say, you're not in it. Okay. Doesn't count for you. You're okay. Oh, all right. Okay. Then, because it was just too anxiety riding for him. All right. So I mean, you may have a situation where you've got to go, okay, this is not a good plan, but oftentimes when we put it in place, we'll do it a couple of days where you're going to get it no matter what. I want you to see how this works. So kids realize that the odds are they're going to win, but I'm going to be consistent every time. And it becomes kind of almost like a little bit of a competition, kind of fun. Can they beat me almost in terms of having some stars left? And it doesn't usually have that. And it's across everybody. So that kind of, it's not like I'm always picking on one person. Yeah. The hero system, if I do a hero system, I usually do the hero system privately. So only Karen and I would know what's going on here, although Karen would earn something for everybody.
So 2 questions. One is, so if you're starting with that large number of stars, then over time are you reducing that number you're starting with? And the second one is, like a response cost system. Is that ever effective where you are giving and taking away off the same chart? You can earn, but then you can also lose?
Okay, the first question was in terms of do you change the number of stars? Yes, you can, like for example, for me, because I had 55-minute period, I would reduce the number of stars, and that usually was a celebration day. So if we don't longer need 18 stars, guys, we only need 14. Super, all right, this is going to be something great. Matter of fact, we're going to do it for 10 minutes today. If at the end of 10 minutes, you get 10 minutes kind of thing. Or if I'm an elementary teacher, and I might go, instead of 15, now it's going to be 20 minutes. It'll be the same number of stars, I just expand the length of the interval. Okay, so I can do it either way in terms of that kind of situation. I usually want this to be for a clear one behavior, not just anything that pisses me off. Okay, so this is for hitting, this is for talkouts, this is for getting out of your seat, whatever that behavior is. Second question was response cost. The problem with giving and taking for some kids is it becomes Monty Hall, let's make a deal. And so what they learn is I can misbehave and then I've just got to rebuild my bank account and then I can misbehave again. Not everybody, but because you've got some kids that do that, you're better off just having a system that restarts itself. You know, so that you're always giving them that fresh start, you know, and getting successes. But usually I like to have the positive system and the negative system be separate systems. Class Dojo, if you use it, usually if it's just for positive, it's great. When you're giving and taking away, usually that's more of all I've got's a number. It's not usually changing behavior much. Somebody had a hand up over here.
Oh, I was just going to say, in my experience, the issue with taking away things from an earning chart is that once they've already earned it, you shouldn't take it away from them.
Right.
They've already showed up for work today, they earned their you know, if you think about our job, if I come to work today and then I'm sick tomorrow, but they want to keep my paycheck from today, I already came to work today.
Right.
So once they earn something, then you don't take it back away from them. And that's, I think, maybe the difference of what you guys were thinking about over there. If they earn it, it's not something that.
Yeah, that certainly is a disincentive for me to even want to earn it if you can take it away from me, right?
With earning the stars, I found working one-on-one with my student with autism that she required more immediate reward. So we had to expand her stars to 10, but once she reached 5, she got a more tangible object like half a piece of gum or a pretzel or a Tic Tac. And then she knew the mother load reward was that she would get to go play with bubbles or water. And she still needed to get all 10 for that, but she got something else to tide her over and show progress.
And we'll do that with that one where you had the stars where I'm going by all the time. Some kids will need to have some kind of stopgap reinforcers in terms of what's going on. A lot of kids, they don't need anything more than just the attention. You know, we don't need to have all the tangibles and stuff in terms of what's going on, but you gotta have what you gotta have. Other questions, comments?
Can you repeat what you called the tally marks that you start with a large number and take away? You said
Differential reinforcement of lower rate behaviors. A DRL. So when you go to all those differential reinforcers, DRO, DRI, DRA, it's DRL. Yes?
You made a comment earlier that there's no research to show that sensory integration really happens the way we think it happens. I'm just wondering, can you say more about whether or not for some students having some sort of sensory input or the motor release or use, do you think it can work, that it shouldn't be a set kind of diet, it's something more as needed?
The dilemma comes down to, I mean, obviously the whole sensory integration thing and the sensory diet, and is this for alerting, is this for calming? There's quite a literature around that in terms of what we should be doing. There hasn't been any empirical studies, and there have been a number of them done. It's sort of like facilitated communication, where you've got a lot of people swearing it works, but we just can't show that it has any evidence that it does. There, and it may be, it's like there were people back in the old days of Dolman and Delicato that would swear, that this patterning where I was crawling with my child made all the difference in the world. And people are saying, well, part of that's probably because that was some of the best interaction that kid got around a whole bunch of stuff. And it wouldn't have mattered what you were doing if you were doing that kind of interaction. That's what some people think we may be getting out of sensory integration, is that it's just somebody is taking me, they're doing stuff with me, I'm engaged. Maybe that's where we're getting the bang, not the actual, that it really truly gets my system back in place. We don't know. I think one of the other problems that we're seeing in the field is that oftentimes we're sending these kids out to sensory integration with a paraprofessional who has no clue what the hell this stuff is all about. And they're going into a big room and there's all these things and the kids are just kind of allowed to go do whatever you. So here's a kid who does not need to be, he needs to be calmed, and he's engaging in all these alerting activities because nobody's guiding them in terms of what they're supposed to be doing. So of course then we're not going to get the output that we think we should be getting. So there are a number of issues, but it's just that there's just at this point no empirical support. So it's a problem when we're demanded by law to use empirically validated interventions. We don't have that. But at the same time, it's probably not, that interaction is probably a good thing. The break's a good thing. I still build it into some IEPs and stuff that I work on, behavior plans. But I always tell people, but just know that there's no research to say this is really getting this sensory system back in sync.
Are there any books or articles that you would recommend to help remind ourselves of this stuff, and also other teachers that may not understand?
Actually, if you email me, I can send you some, some things that might be helpful. Yeah. So my email's on the PowerPoint. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day and a safe trip. Stay out of my way on 355.